Let's take you to our studio at the Stanton Convention Center, where my colleague Stephen Christus is standing by. Stephen, a very good afternoon to you. We know that UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is expected to speak sometime later this afternoon. And of course, we know that he hasn't shied away from some of the very uncomfortable conversations, speaking about the importance of reform.
And Paul, yes, good afternoon to you, and thank you very much indeed. We do expect Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, to actually start speaking fairly soon here. Also, the Chinese delegation will be speaking from around 3 o'clock, we understand, and then the Indian delegation from around 4 o'clock. So we are expecting a very busy afternoon. The headline, of course, still about the expansion. 6 new leaders coming into BRICS, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia and Argentina. Still many conversations about where this leaves the nature of BRICS, what it will be like in the future, how expansion will go from here, and then also, I suppose, what this will do to the economies of all of these different countries. If you look at some of them, Saudi Arabia, for example, huge amounts of money to spend, but Ethiopia could do with huge amounts of money as part of its development, and all of this may well be tied up with the new development bank. What is going to happen there? Chifipa Mhango is an economist. He's the chief economist of the Don Consulting Group. Chifipa, good afternoon to you. Thanks very much. There's so many different elements to all of this. But the first and most obvious thing to say would be that the new development bank is probably going to have a lot more money to play with.
It has got a lot of work to do. I think I've been hearing the conversation around their new path in terms of the vision and well the strategy. Just on the table alone, I've seen the countries which have actually joined Ethiopia. Ethiopia was going through some war situation in 2020. Obviously now they've been calmed down in terms of the situation there. But then they need money for reconstruction. About $20 billion is required for Ethiopia in terms of the reconstruction effort. So you can see already that the demands in terms of the new expansion of the countries will actually be much more massive at this stage.
It's interesting, usually in human terms, between people and between countries, the richer you are, the more powerful you are. Economics is essential to power. Saudi Arabia coming in with so much money, it's spending a huge amount of money just in its government investment program at the moment. We've all seen that. It comes into BRICS. It won't dislodge China or anything like that, but it's suddenly quite a powerful player, isn't it, just through sheer cash?
I think that's what we needed to bring a little bit of commonalities in terms of the approach. Because if you have got only one dominant country from the issue of the financial muscle, it becomes a bit of a problem, because now it means that the voice, there will be a dominant voice in the whole setup. So I think bringing in more countries in terms of diversity, with regard to the provision that they can provide in the countries in terms of value addition, I think it's quite more important for the whole arrangement of the BRICS at this stage.
We also now have a situation where you've got really big disparities. So, there's some interesting similarities between ourselves and Argentina. Argentina's been going through a really difficult patch for a little while. Yes. But again, maybe Ethiopia is a good example. Quite a poor country in need of development, has been for some time. And then you've got some very rich countries. So then the relationship between them, what will that be like? It can't, on the stage they'll all be equal. But underneath that,
I think what that means that the kind of conversation that will be happening now will be much more diversified in terms of approach. To reach a common ground might even take longer because of the process of engagement, how to make sure that there's consensus building in terms of the different countries, in terms of parities. I was just looking at all these different countries in terms of population. For instance, you're mentioning Ethiopia. Ethiopia is coming in now with 123 million people. Argentina is coming in with 46 million people. You're talking about Egypt is coming in with almost 100 million people. So that expansion also brings in element of market expansion. But then if you look at the different issues in terms of fiscal stance, for instance, some countries have got a massive debt to GDP, over 80%, while the others have got a debt to GDP below 40%. Which means that on the fiscal front, in terms of how to maneuver with regard to expansion in the budget level, it will also require element of support. And that's why I think when you've got countries like Saudi Arabia also coming in with their financial muscle, as well as the energy capacity, it adds more value to the setup. I was also looking at issues of monetary policy environment. Egypt, inflation, 36%. You look at other countries, inflation rate is below 10%. So those elements also come into issue. We come to discussions. our own challenges on South Africa, obviously, the unemployment rate over 30%. But then if you look at other countries, unemployment rate, for example, EU, is only 2%. So most of the other countries, the unemployment rate is actually below 10%. So which means that when we are doing these kind of projects, we have to look at, okay, now, which countries will be focusing on projects which are labor intensive? Which countries will be focusing on projects that are more energy intensive? Because all those elements, I think, will require a different approach in terms of selecting projects in terms of location for different countries. So a new path in terms of discussions and a new path in terms of reaching consensus for development.
It seems to me really that one of the big issues now is going to be the instrument of the new development bank, that it's actually going to be a lot more important than it has been. It's played a role already, sure, there's been dispersing of loans and things like that, but suddenly it's going to be seen as a lot more important because it's going to have a lot more heft. If you've got more money and you have to invest that money somewhere, you have to lend it to someone as a bank, and you have to lend it to these countries presumably, that suddenly makes it very interesting. Suddenly it's a very influential body.
It will be a very influential body. I think if you look at the history of the multilateral institutions such as the World Bank, one of the biggest problems we've had in the past is the issue of loans based on conditions. So that element, I think, needs to be looked at in terms of the approach of the new development bank for the BRICS. Because you cannot have a situation where every loan has got conditions. But also the repayment process. You have a situation whereby, if you're looking for a loan of, let's say, $20 billion US dollars, I'm just giving an example here, you get that loan this year, and next year already you're starting to pay that loan. So that, I think, creates a little bit of pressure. So there also has been a criteria being developed around the new development bank in terms of what will be the repayment processes with regard to the loans that these countries will actually be taking. But also the issue of flexibility in terms of what kind of interest rates will actually be applied. But I think that's where I think some of the conversation will also have to be coming in, because then the issue of neutrality approach in terms of monetary policy becomes very key in this process as well.
Chifipa Mhango, thank you very much indeed, Chief Economist at the Don Consultancy Group.